All right, show of hands. How many of you love refinishing? Yeah, me either. So unfortunately, I have to refinish this desk. This is a Heywood Wakefield desk that my brother found on the Facebook Marketplace. We picked it up, brought it back to the shop, and now it's time to assess how much damage there is, what I need to fix and repair, and even if there are parts that need to be replaced to get this thing functional again. It could be a fun challenge, and I thought it would be a fun thing to document. So you guys, if you have to do something similar, maybe this will give you some tips and tricks. I don't know. I have no idea what we're in for here. I'm not worried about retaining value and things like that. This is not exactly an antique from what I read online, based on the fact that there is a eagle logo thing here on the inside of the drawer indicates that this was produced 1949 or later. So it doesn't really even qualify as an antique. We're not worried about retaining the old finish or anything like that. This is purely a brute force DIY, make this thing beautiful and functional again sort of project, right? So let's get into it. Let's start taking a look at some of these parts and see what we're gonna need to do to access the pieces we need to get to, and what kind of damage is on this thing, because it is definitely well loved. Now, everything I read says that this is all solid, with the exception of a few panels like drawer bottoms and stuff that'll be ply or some version of plywood. This does look like it's solid. We do have a separation here right at the joint. And when I look at the end, I see that it's a little bit of a tongue and groove there. So I don't know what we're gonna do with this. We've got a nice little curve here, which is unfortunate. I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to get that curve out, but we could probably do something about this gap. But yeah, that's gonna be a good amount of work for that. Let's take a look at the drawers. Now, as big as this drawer is, the action on it actually isn't too bad considering. But that does come completely out. And while the bottom of the drawer doesn't look too bad from the user side, look at the underside. Oh man, we got some serious delamination that happened with whatever the layup was for this bottom, and separation between the pieces. Not sure how far we're going to go with fixing that, but there's definitely a potential issue here. Right now, I'm not sure if these drawers are interchangeable in their positions. Oh, well, look at that. That's a double file drawer. So no, these two are right where they're supposed to be. So this is a big old file drawer. Looks to be in pretty good shape. It's got some dividers inside there. We've got some dovetails at the back that seem to be coming undone. And you can see we've got a nice wooden track, a center guide that actually seems to be working pretty well. Oh, hello, spider. How are you?
There's no spider here.
All right, here's another drawer. Oh, it's not in bad shape at all. Okay, that was pretty good. Ooh, this is a little not great. So I guess this piece here that supports the main middle drawer there, just a piece of plywood that's delaminating. It's not ideal. I don't know that that's worth a replacement though. We might just be able to kind of spot repair that. Okay, get these out of here. The other thing I'm looking for as I do this, I'm actually looking for ways that I can detach these parts and pieces to pull this thing apart. Okay, now on that one, we've got some major delamination on the bottom. It's interesting. Oh, hello, spider. This is fun. The whole spider thing, that's great.
I will hunt down the alleged arachnid and spread them to kingdom come.
So when I look inside here, I see those cleats with some screws holding it in place. And then behind the drawers, you could see the side panel and the back panel are held with those same cleats. So I'm not sure how much adhesive is involved, or if this is just mechanical fasteners, which would be nice. That would make life a whole lot easier if that was the case. Now, here's an important tip for you. As you start to take something like this apart, not a bad idea to take a pencil or a marker in inconspicuous areas and label things or number them. And then take your phone and grab some pictures. It's really important to know where these parts go, and it may seem like it makes sense now and it's all very easy, but this is not your piece of furniture. You didn't make it, so you're going to be counting on a memory of like seeing it once or twice. So it's a good idea to take your phone and get all the pictures that you can so that you have a reference when it comes time to actually reassemble this thing. Mother's Day is right around the corner, and if your mom is anything like mine, she's kinda hard to buy for. So I have a great gift idea that any mother would love to have, an Oreo Carver Mat picture frame. The Carver Mat frame is Wi-Fi connected and displays photos and videos in high resolution. It even has a speaker and a touch bar for swiping through the slideshow. The display on this thing is so crisp and vibrant that the images look better than high quality prints, and you can view it from pretty much any angle and still see a perfect image. The frame itself fits beautifully into any decor in any room, and even if you want to use the frame on a bedside table, you don't have to worry about the light because it auto dims and it shuts down when the house lights go off. Now let me show you how easy it is to use. You simply open up the app, select the photos you want to display on the screen, and click Add. Within seconds, your new photos and videos will start showing up on the frame. We love these things so much that we even bought one for my brother, Nicole's brother, Nicole's mom, and even our editor Todd. And my favorite feature is being able to send photos directly to other family members' frames using the app. Instead of having pictures getting lost in a sea of texts, I can update my mom's frame with photos of important family events and moments that she may have missed, like this one, and even this one. Now another great feature is that if you're buying this as a gift, you can even preload it with images. This way, when your special loved one opens it up and turns it on, they'll immediately understand why the gift is so special. And let's talk about security for a minute. A lot of people these days are apprehensive about sharing pictures of their kids and precious family moments online, and rightfully so. But with an Oreo frame, you can share everything you want privately and securely. Now obviously we're celebrating Mother's Day here, but the Oreo frame makes a great gift for anyone or any occasion. Now if you want to pick up an Oreo Carver Mat frame, you can get $35 off plus free shipping using my code Whisperer. Thank you Oreo for sponsoring today's show. If I had to guess, I would say this cleat, jeez. Yeah, I would guess that this cleat is attached to the back of the top, right? Attached to the back strip there and then screwed into the back panel. But let's see what happens. Nope, that is not what's going on here. Not what's going on here. All right, so the side cleats are definitely coming along for the ride with our top. At the back, it's a little different situation. I'm not sure what's going on there because it doesn't seem to want to let go. The other thing is you never know with a piece of furniture this old what's been done to fix it along the way when things have broken. So something that may not have been glued together in the original production may have been glued later on. So all I'm doing now is just kind of knocking it around and seeing if there's just something minor holding it up. The spiders are like, dude, I've been living here for 20 years. Leave us alone. Alright, that seemed to have done the trick. Alright, this is pretty much what I suspected. We've got these cleats that are screwed into the underside, and then those cleats are driven into the side panels with screws. What are you doing, man? Get out of the drawer. Get out of the drawer. Get out of there. Now, as a custom furniture maker, the way I make furniture is really unrealistic for the general market. I put way too much time and effort into things that people won't see. So I'm always intrigued when I see shortcuts that are done that actually are really sensible. So here's the underside of our top, and you see this divot here? If you have a board that's not perfect, as long as it looks perfect on the show surface, it really doesn't matter what happens on the underside of your table or your desktop like this. So this area here is, this board was just too short, and with the planing and sanding they did, it never even got touched, so it's very rough. But what happens is if this extends all the way to the end and you have an overhang, you might see that little gap there, and indeed, we do have a gap, and here's how they fixed it. After the top was attached, they just kind of drove this little wedge. Hey, I'm trying to show something here, dude. They drove this little wedge in there to take up that gap. So, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to see the methodology used when you have to make a lot of something and you can't be stupid picky about it. All right, let me go. Let me go. I got work to do, man. Let it go. Don't you kick me. Don't you kick me with them little bunny paws. Come here. All right, come on, psycho. Hey, that's my leg. All right, so these cleats actually look to be in decent shape. So what I'm gonna try to do is write on them so I know exactly where they go. There's no reason to replace them if they're working just fine. So I'm gonna go in the orientation that makes sense to me, where I'm looking at the desk. This would be left top cleat. And also, I'll take some pictures just to make sure. Now, as I remove these cleats, keep in mind there is an inherent risk. These cleats are actually potentially doing more than simply giving us a means to attach to the sides. They could be holding this top flat. So as we remove the cleats, it's certainly possible that this top may start to move a little bit more on us, which is not great, but there's not too many ways around it. Also wouldn't hurt to make a pencil line, locating the cleats too. And maybe it goes without saying, just make sure you hold on to the hardware. It'd be cool if we could just continue to use the original screws. And so far it does appear that all of these screws are the same length, so that should not cause us a problem. All right, there's our top. Put that to the side and deal with it later. Now, if you look back here, this is what was fighting me. They did put a few spots of glue when attaching that top, and it's one of those cases where I'm thankful they didn't use a lot of glue because it made my life easier taking that apart. And looking right here, my guess is this is where your coffee or water or tea spills go. That's why we have this damage here. Could have been some other type of damage, which you think you're working at a desk, you knock over your coffee, where's it gonna go? But under this drawer and cause you some staining and stuff down here, so it happens. All right, so to get this top panel loose, we've got screws that go down into our cabinet partitions or sides. We've got screws that go into our back panel, and I'm hoping that there's no glue in the dado that they cut here, and all they're relying on are these sort of toe-nailed angled screws in here. So we'll see. If they come loose, then that actually works in our favor. Make it a lot easier to take this apart. And from what I am seeing so far, I mean, outside of some of the captured panels, this is all solid wood. Some more glue. You can see it definitely let go. Now, it's fun to get all these little lessons in furniture making. As you take something like this apart, you could see the rhyme and reason for why they did things. Now, I'm guessing there's no glue in this dado, primarily because this is a piece of plywood. This is not going to expand and contract over the course of humidity changes in the same way that solid wood will. This side panel is solid wood, so there's a natural expansion and contraction. So if you put glue in here, you're immobilizing that panel and you're gonna probably cause a failure at some point in the future, which is my guess as to why they just went with screws. Because screws, the metal and the wood, if there's movement, the wood will give to some extent and allow a little bit of shifting back and forth. So that's why I'm guessing that this thing is gonna pop right out. Yep, and it does. Now I still got more stuff to remove, so I'm not ready to fully remove that, but I did just want to make sure that there's no glue in there, and there isn't. And I can't be 100% sure, but I think we might be able to pull this guy out. I think there's enough wiggle room in those dados that we can get this panel right out of there. Yeah, it'll go, but I don't think there's any reason to force it. I think at this point, I'm going to continue removing our cleats at the back so that our sides can let go. Now there's a top strip here. The entire back panel doesn't go all the way down. There's just an upper strip that's going to come off here momentarily. There it is. Definitely want to label this so you don't get it mixed up later. Up. And now this is an important point for when we put this thing back together. This top panel is kind of what joins these two sub-assemblies. So as we reassemble this thing, we'll probably do it in that way. We'll have our side piece here, this other smaller side there, create these sub-assemblies. Then we bring the two sub-assemblies together with the middle and the back strip. Boom, baby. Now, before I go any further with this assembly, this is where you get into the weeds, so make sure you are labeling things so that there's absolutely no question what's what. This is left pedestal. Now, before I go too far, one thing I want to double check is the role of this front surface here on this shelf. I noticed that it's set back, right? So we have a little gap here from our front edge to where this exists, and even more so here. I think that's all hidden, and I believe the drawer front just rests against this surface and this surface. So if that's the case, I don't have to worry too much about locating this front to back. I still have some, gaps at the back. So when I reassemble this, I could very well push that back further than it is right now. And I want to be very careful that that's actually not going to hurt anything. So let me bring my drawer back. And And I'm just confirming that the goal is indeed to bottom out with the drawer front, not necessarily hitting this lip. And yeah, we're not even touching that lip. So I think we'll be okay to not, notate where this front edge terminates. All right, now before I take this apart, a couple things to note. Look at this panel here. This is actually solid wood. So interestingly enough, they went with ply again down here where we have that potential movement issue. And here they went with solid wood, which means this shelf is going to move with the sides in unison. So you could potentially glue those into the grooves. Now, did they? I'm still not 100% sure because there's a couple of screws under here. So let's remove those screws and see if I get any movement in this shelf. If it's glued in, we're probably just going to leave this as is and do our best to just kind of resurface everything. Oh, there it goes. So I've loosened everything, but I'm a little bit afraid there's screws holding us in at the bottom. So I'm going to carefully tip this because I do not want to rip anything out. Oh yeah, there we are. They're not even holding anything anyway. Jeez. Ooh, mama. Yeah, if I can get this base out of here, then I could access those other screws. Oh yeah. This panel is probably ready to come. Here we go. Left pedestal. Now, while I don't love the refinishing process, there's really valuable information that can come from this. And the early part of my career was actually spent in a refinishing shop for a couple of years. And I learned so much. I hated it, but I learned so much because it gives you an advantage to see how furniture holds up in typical usage situations by the time it needs to be refinished 15, 20, 30 years later. And an interesting lesson we can get right here is everything that I've taken apart, while the solid wood pieces have certainly moved and we've got some cupping and all kinds of misbehaving to deal with, the panels are still fairly well intact. But what happens to our plywood? The plywood delaminates, it's definitely in a lot worse shape, and it's more likely to be the thing that I replace in this structure, right? So if you're thinking about the use of solid wood and plywood, it's important to know how those two things are going to hold up and how they stand the test of time. This isn't always going to be the case. Sometimes the solid wood will go haywire and your plywood is fine. Kind of just depends on the conditions, but I find it very interesting that almost everything that looks like it's in need of replacement is a plywood part. So, okay. So we got this left set of dividers and the whole pedestal ready to go. Going to kind of keep things organized in piles. I'm just going to take apart the right side. It's going to be the same process. Oh man, the bottom panel on the right pedestal. Ooh, mama, look at that thing. Ew. Not so sure about that one. All right, so as I evaluate all these pieces, I'm just considering how much work I'm going to need to do. And honestly, pretty much every solid board in this thing or every solid panel is cupped, and this is just one of our side pieces. You can see it's cupped and it's warped. We're not really going to be able to do much about the twist, but we certainly can help correct some of this cupping. So you see, pretty significant smiley face here. So one way that we could fix that, especially in a situation where it's not going to be visible in the final product, is a technique called kerfing. We can cut a few straight lines with the table saw, and you have to be careful not to go all the way through, but you do want to leave, a decent amount of material at the outside surface so it's not obvious what you've done. And by relieving that material, you almost create a little bit of an accordion effect, and it sort of becomes flexible. Each panel will have to be addressed individually based on what it's doing, because it is not flat, so we have to be careful of any rocking. That's going to be kind of dangerous here at the table saw if we're not paying close attention to what's going on. So I will be adjusting the height of the blade, probably leaving myself with maybe, let's see what we can get away with. If I could have a 1/4 inch left, great. If I have to go all the way to the point where there's only 1/8 of an inch left, so be it. But I want to leave as much material above that kerf cut as possible. And when picking my kerf locations, I am being careful to avoid the joints. You could already see that the glue joints that were there before, they're starting to come apart. So if we put too much stress there and relieve some of the structure underneath, we may just wind up sending that crack all the way through. So I am going to try to miss those And I think we'll do 3 kerfs on this one. Pretty much all of the solid panels received kerfs and are now flexible enough to press flat. To help them keep their new shape and fill the kerf slots, I'll use some epoxy. A slow set epoxy with a little bit of filler added should do the trick. And a heat gun helps the epoxy settle into place and removes the air bubbles. Using a couple of Cauls, I'll clamp each panel nice and flat while the glue dries. Whoa! Jeez! Oreo, you stay out of here, dude. Not today, my friend, not today. All right, something else to be aware of as you're doing this is if you have any old screw holes, not a bad idea to just try to get a little bit of epoxy down into that screw hole. If we reuse it, you're going to be thankful that you did that because now the screw has something substantial to bite into. And if you see any regular cracks just from, you know, the age of the piece, go ahead and fill those while you're here too. After an overnight cure, you can see that the panels are way flatter than they were, which should make reassembly a lot easier. On some of the panels, we have hairline cracks where the glue lines are opening up. I tried applying clamping pressure, but they aren't closing, so I'm going to fill them with epoxy. With the dark stain that I plan to use, it should blend in just fine. I'll use a combination of a putty knife and heat to help drive the epoxy as deep as possible into the crack. If the crack went all the way through the board's thickness, we could actually use a shop vac to pull the glue down, but that's not the situation here. Toward the end, the thin epoxy is just going to run out, so I'll add some filler to the epoxy and then push that into the crack, and then wrap a piece of masking tape up and over to hold the epoxy in place. I can use some of that thicker epoxy on top of the rest of the crack as well. While the panels were setting up, I decided to try to fix up any delaminated panels. This is the bottom of the big drawer compartment, and I might still decide to replace this piece, but I'll try to fix it first. The blue tape creates a little well for the epoxy to collect, and I'll use a putty knife to drive some of the epoxy in between the plywood layers. I'll clamp it up overnight. While most of the drawer compartment pieces are in decent shape, this bottom left panel definitely had some water damage. It's delaminated and feels kinda soft to the touch, and the runner is also broken, so I think we'll just replace the whole thing. I originally thought I'd be using the router to flush trim a copy, so I removed the runner and traced around to get the rough shape. After I made the bandsaw cut, I realized that I could probably get away with just sanding the edges, so I clamped the original piece onto the replacement and used a pencil to get some more exact lines. I then sanded until the pencil lines were gone. For the runner, I'll replace it with some rift sawn white oak. Rift or quarter sawn wood would be a great choice for runners, as it's nice and stable and doesn't expand and contract too much across its width. I dog-eared the corners and broke the sharp edges with a plane and some sanding. Now, when I look at the original, I can see that the runner kicks out at the back for some reason. I can't be sure that ours will need to do that until after the final installation, so to get around that, I'm only going to secure the runner at the front. After the final assembly, we can check the action of the drawer and secure the runner at that time. Unfortunately, some of these, especially the ones that were constructed from solid wood, these are actually in really good shape, but we do have to fix some things. In this case, they just put a screw at the front and a nail at the back. And we have to consider that this is likely going to expand and contract across the grain. So in this orientation, so if we lock this thing down with glue or even a whole bunch of screws, we could end up with some deforming or cracking or something happening later on that would not be very good. So here's a solution for that. They have immobilized the front with a screw. You can actually do things like add glue to one portion, like 4 or 5 inches, and then let the rest of it float with a nail or a screw in the back. And this way, if there is any motion, you're still allowing it to occur. You're just sending it all in one direction. So that's pretty much what I'm going to try to accomplish here. Now, this screw hole, I don't know. I got to be careful because that almost warrants replacement, but it does seem to be holding. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of hide glue. Now, hide glue is a nice choice here because it's reversible. If we put a little heat and moisture on a hide glue joint, it will come apart. So a runner is something that may need to be repaired in the future. So it's a real good idea to use something like hide glue for that. And I'm just going to use the existing holes that are here to drive a small screw Let me see if I can get this up high enough to countersink. Find that little hole, like a little pilot hole. And I did do a little bit of sanding on here. That looks a whole lot better though. But man, what a difference between solid wood panels, how they held up compared to the plywood. Now when we did our kerfing before, you may have noticed that on our top we have these exposed areas where the kerfs are now visible. Everywhere else it was no problem, you couldn't really see them. But up here, that's definitely going to be an issue. Again, we're going with a darker stain, so I actually think that that would probably blend in pretty well. But I still feel inclined to do something a little bit better than that. So what I'm going to do is take my fine-tooth dovetail saw here, and I'm actually just going to cut a little slot. I want to remove all of that epoxy, and we're going to put a wood patch in there. Now this, I believe the top is birch, and I have trouble telling birch and maple apart sometimes, so I do happen to have some hard maple, and we'll patch it in with that. All right, so let's get this guy cut first. Now, I'm not necessarily following the epoxy line because that was cut with a kerf, and then the clamps really flattened everything out, right? So it's actually going to make a tapered slot. It's going to make patching it a whole lot harder. So I'm just going to try to make two parallel lines here. Even if that means going into more good wood. I got my teeny tiny chisel, and I'm just going to start getting some of this stuff out of there. I do want to keep my chisel running in a straight line. I want the bottom of this thing to be flat, if I can make it flat. Now, I've cut a couple of maple strips. Each one is just a slightly different thickness. It's right off the bandsaw, so I'm not getting too picky about it. And this way I can kind of try different ones until I get the fit I'm looking for. Like that one's too loose, but I do think this one is pretty good. All right, so I'm just gonna cut a little piece off of the end, and hopefully at the miter saw, it won't go flying. So just get a little bit of glue on fix and in the slot, and we'll tap it in there. Now you might notice that the end grain is going this way. It's because this is the end of the board. I figure orienting the grain like that is going to give us the best shot of disguising this. And when you're pushing this in, if you have to favor one side or the other, like let's say the bottom of that little channel is not totally flat, favor the top because that's going to be the most visible. Just make sure there's no gap up there. And be careful because this can split pretty easily too. All right, so once we have all the repairs done on our panels and anything that's like the flat work, not going to worry about the drawers just yet, just kind of the main case of this thing. We can start the sanding process. So I'm going to start with 120. Most of this finish is very dry, very old. It's going to come up pretty quickly. So we're going to go probably from 120 to 180. I'm not really even sure how high I'm going to go. I haven't really decided everything on the final finish just yet. And you know, for something like the top is the showpiece, right? So we don't want to necessarily sand that first and then flip it and possibly scratch and dent it. So we're going to flip this guy over. I'm going to start removing the epoxy first, and then we'll go to the show side. And we'll do the same thing with each one of these epoxy filled panels. All right, so now I'm working on the underside of that top drawer. You can see I got the center mounted guide here. I don't know that I'm going to replace this piece. I think this ideally would be replaced. It's got a lot of staining here. I'm guessing someone spilled drinks at the desk. They go into the drawer, seep down into this area, and never got wiped up. So this just kind of sits here and it's a little bit gross. I did successfully get these laminations to kind of firm up here with that epoxy treatment we did. But again, if I just had a plywood sitting around, I probably would replace this piece. But we've got a lot of holes and things that we're going to have to rely on later that would have to be put into a replacement piece. And I don't know that it's worth it. I think this might be one where we'll just kind of clean it up and hope for the best. This is cool, check this out. I was speculating about the date before. Well, no need to speculate. Stamp says March 23rd, 1949. Now, with the base pretty much fully sanded, we can inch our way back to reassembling this thing, but if I can make things a little bit better as I go, I'm gonna try to do that. So for instance, on our back panels, these would sit on the back of either the left or the right pedestal. We've got these cleats that are attached. Now our grain is running this way. So there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't add a little bit of glue here onto these cleats in addition to the screws that hold them in place. And that's just a little bit of an extra insurance policy. But again, anytime we think about gluing something down, we really have to think about wood movement and whether it's going to help or hurt us in the future. All right, so let's get these guys attached. And thankfully, I was real careful about what I wrote on here for reference, and you can kind of see where the holes are. And if they don't line up, you might have the wrong piece there. Let's put a little bit of glue, drop one of these in, help locate us. Now, interestingly enough, I noticed that pretty much all of the internal surfaces were unfinished on the inside. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to put finish on both sides of any kind of a solid wood panel like that, just to prevent any kind of warpage. But when they built it, they did not do that. So I think now is a good time. Takes a little bit more time to do this, but I think it's worth it to at least make sure that we have a good coat on the inside just to seal it from any kind of exposure it might receive. So this is just the water-based finish. This is not the kind of finish I'm going to use on the outside, but it should be good enough to just get me a nice coat on the inside. The other thing you need to think about is stank. Oil-based finishes, really anything containing oils, is going to stink a whole lot more than water-based materials, and it's going to take a lot longer for that smell to dissipate after it's applied. So in this case, water-based finish like this is definitely going to be what I would consider the better choice. Best part is it's going to dry real fast, and then I'll be able to move on to assembling some of our pedestals here. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is if you're going to put glue on a surface later, you don't want finish on that, right? So this edge right here, this is where the vertical, left and right side of the pedestal will come in, and it's attached with screws. It really has me thinking, since it's going to be a solid wood to solid wood connection there, I may very well just go with some glue. I think that's going to serve the piece a lot better in the long run, and the screws will still be there to help hold us in position. So all that said, I'm not going to put finish here because I may wind up having some glue. So next up, I'm going to bring the bottom panel in here. I'm going to tack it in with a couple of screws and some glue. Now I got to be careful. This is plywood, this is solid wood. Again, movement issues. So I'm only going to put a little bit of glue here on both of these panels at this back corner, and this way we could add a screw or nails later to allow this panel to move independently of the side, or I should say the side panel will move independently of the bottom. And ideally, we won't have much movement to worry about at all. But you know how these things go. Putting this bottom in place will also help keep our assembly nice and square, which is a concern at this point because we haven't put anything together yet. Okay, the second one is solid wood to solid wood, so we can glue this as much as we want. Honestly, with a lot of glue in here, I gotta wonder if the screws that they used before, I don't even think we're gonna need to use those. It's a captured panel, not going anywhere, plenty of glue. I think it's going to be fine. So you see this gap right here? I haven't driven those screws in from this cleat into the side panel just yet, and I think this would be a good opportunity to throw on some clamps. And this is part of what we're trying to correct with all this, is to get some of these gaps to be minimal. The other thing is, you might notice this is unfinished. I could have pre-finished these pieces with my final finish before assembly. The problem is I want to make sure that all these things look good glued together. And the way this is supposed to act, it's supposed to be a smooth transition with no lip between our side panel and the rear panel. So if I, just pre-finish this and I have to sand it later, that's going to be a mess. So I think it's best to do one final sanding after the assembly, and then we'll be able to do a nice finish. So all these little details here will be blended. Then now on the inside, I could drive a couple of these screws. Whoops. All right, now things are about to get real interesting. Drawers can be tricky because you might do some serious damage trying to take something apart. And thankfully, there seem to be only two that I really have to worry about. So the bottom of this particular drawer is just in real bad shape. All the laminations have separated inside and outside. This is not ideal, So what I'm going to try to do is take it apart very carefully so that we could clean it up, put it back together. I'm noticing a few things here on the side panel. These boards already let go of one another, so we're going to need to glue that back so it acts as one board again. We've got these machine cut dovetails, which is fine, but our pin board has a very, very small amount of material on those half blinds. That's going to be really easy to screw that up, so got to be careful. On the underside, we've got our runner here and all these little glue blocks. Now, if I can get a new bottom cut and have that inserted in there with glue, as long as the fit is decent, we won't really even need these glue blocks. I never use them myself in my work, so we should be okay without them. Now, in the front here, the way these sides are attached to our drawer fronts is with a sliding dovetail. So we have our exit point here, and chances are that glue's not holding too much in there anyway. So first thing I want to try to do is see if we can't get the dovetails to come apart. I don't want to knock them all the way apart just yet. I just want to see, are they going to budge? That's the thing. I don't want to break anything here. This is, of course, going to come apart anyway. So this one, this already looks pretty loose. I'm just going to give it a couple of light taps from the inside. And I could already see it's popping up. Now, honestly, we may lose some of our tails on this, and I don't think that's a huge, factor here. No one's really going to see them. It's all the way at the back. Given the age of this piece, it is what it is. But to completely have a, functional drawer again, it's probably worth doing a little damage. Let's see. So now this side, let's see what happens with these. Oh, there we go. 3 splits, actually. There's a split here. So on this panel, 1, 2, 3 different boards that were glued together, were not glued together very well. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. Okay, so I'm not going to knock those guys out just yet. Let's remove the nails on this runner. And I'm going to get some of these glue blocks out of here too. Got a nice crack in that runner as well. Lovely. So I got a nail at the front and a nail in the back. I'm going to yoink that out of there. Oh, before I do that, let's grab a pencil. I'm going to mark on the drawer front here. Turn around so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Just a pencil mark on each side. That's going to help me realign this when I install it again. So got a little lip there on the front too. All right, let's see if we can get this out now. Woo. Wonderful. So this drawer side really didn't want to come out, so I'm not going to force it. The other drawer side can be easily glued back together. And the drawer runner has a nice split that's pretty easy to repair with glue. The drawer pulls come off by removing a couple of screws. And now I can sand all the drawer parts. The pulls are curved and sculptural, so I really don't want to hit them with a power sander. The old finish scrapes off pretty easily, and I could use some backside sandpaper for the final sanding. So we're going to give this a go, trying to get this thing back together. Not a bad idea to take a little bit of sandpaper or a chisel or something, just knock off some of the glue that's on here. And smooth that out a little bit. And because this is an old woodworking joint, we don't know exactly what kind of glue they used for it. I am using epoxy. It's going to give me a long working time. It's also going to lubricate the joints and allow them to come together a little bit easier. So one thing I'm a little bit concerned about here is, I don't know if you saw when we took these apart, but the way this is assembled is not typical. The fact that these sides have to slide into the front makes it impossible for us to get this panel in without having to wedge these pieces apart to make room for the other tailboard, right, for the rear piece. So typically when you see things done that way, they'll remove this bottom piece, so you could just slide your bottom right in there, and then you tack it with nails or screws up into the back. Can't do that here. So I don't know, it was an interesting choice, but you know, they do whatever makes sense for them. So just knocking that down just enough so that I can get a little bit of glue in there. And now you might be able to see what I mean. This back piece doesn't go on this way. It has to go inside our two sides. So you can't do that unless you pull them apart. So now we're going to try to get this panel in here. Put some epoxy in each of the tail sockets here. My bottom panel stock here is a little bit thicker than the original stuff. So the bottom panel was loose, so now it's a little more snug in that groove, which is good. I am a little bit concerned though that it might impact something else, you know, maybe the way the runner attaches, but we will see here in a second. So make sure we get that guy seated. And then hopefully be able to get these to go home. Go to your home. There we go. Oh yeah, that's going in. Good, 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 good. I need a little extra support here though. I'm gonna hang this off the side. Look at that. Hopefully I could send this bad boy home. Side. Good enough. Okay, so we will add some epoxy on here. No reason not to. Now this little track is a little bit bowed, so it's not totally flat. So I would like to get a little bit of pressure on here, so I think this might work. We'll take this can, drop the drawers so that the pressure is right on that drawer bottom, but keeping us up off the workbench. And then I'll put a weight right on top of that.
We are here to pop you off.
Let that sit. Booyah. Now, while I've got a bunch of epoxy mixed up, I should at least look at some of the other drawers and see if I could use it there. Well, thankfully, these dividers are in really good shape. I'm actually surprised they're even coming out. Oh yeah, look at that. Boom, baby. All right, so inside here, nothing but a little bit of a cleanup. Don't think we have to take anything apart, but I do see some dovetails back here that are letting go. Looks like a little more of that water damage there. So let's just get a little epoxy on there and then we'll close it up. right, so the warpage down here, I'm not sure that this is gonna hold. That's a lot of pressure with that wood movement there. But we will close that up with some epoxy. And if we're lucky, it'll hold. So for this big, wide, massive drawer, I've been thinking a lot about it, and I do think there would be justification for replacing this bottom. When I look at this surface here, I could do a little sanding in there to clean it up. This is actually in pretty good shape. It's the underside that I'm a little bit concerned about. And in spite of this, the drawer is still kind of held together really well. But take a look at what we got going on here. So we've got this very significant amount of delamination where the veneer pieces, you know, through probably moisture exposure, have just let go of any adhesive that was there, and it starts to bubble up. And based on what we saw on the divider that sits under this piece, the amount of moisture that was there, I'm guessing some spills were there. No one cleaned under the drawer, and it just sat there until this happened. So I'm gonna try to figure out a way that we can still use this and not waste this piece and have to take all this apart. I think I have a trick up my sleeve that will allow us to flatten this back out and then clamp it in place. I'm just gonna take some epoxy, and I've got this little irrigation syringe. You can get these on Amazon. Just use that to pull up some of this epoxy. It's pretty thick. The syringe really doesn't want stuff this viscous, but it'll still work. I'm gonna take that guy, put it right into there. Just begin driving that epoxy. And once I get there, I can get under the sheets. Terminology makes all the difference. Oh, I got glue out and there's Oreo. What a surprise. Come on, you little ding dong. No, might be a little messier, but this is gonna save me some time. Look. Definitely messier. Okay, so same thing on this crack. It's really hard to tell how much is getting in there, but that should do the trick. Only gonna do 2 at once here, because it's gonna get a little bit tricky. Now here's the cool part. We're gonna try to essentially reverse the memory of this wood. It's already curving up like this because of that water exposure. Well, let's send it back the other way. So when you put, especially on a raw piece of wood, when you put water on it, the thinner it is, the easier it is to see this. You put water on one side, those fibers absorb the water and they expand. And we're only putting water on one face. So if you do that, you wind up with expansion on one side, but nothing happening on the other side, and that leads to a bow or a cup like this. So putting moisture on this side will send this veneer the other way. It'll almost, hopefully, almost, completely reverse what we see here. So now over the course of a couple of minutes, I'm gonna let this sit here and absorb. And if I see any real dry spots, I will come back and hit it with a little bit more. Now the key is to make sure you're using an epoxy that has a long enough working time that we can delay like this, because I do want to add clamping pressure, but not until this wood relaxes and goes back into the shape I want it in. All right, I think that's reversed the curvature enough that we could probably throw some clamps on there and press that thing down without breaking it. All right, now here's where things are gonna get a little bit convoluted, because I need to put clamping pressure inside there, and there's really no way to do that easily without cauls, cauls that are wider than the depth of the drawer. And I need to elevate everything here because I want to be able to get clamps underneath it. So this is about the spacing of those 2 center joints. Roughly, place this guy right on top. I'm gonna center up these cauls with the joint. Now I'm just gonna grab a couple of cauls. They're not gonna span the entire thing, but I think that's gonna be close enough. And I could throw these clamps on, squeezing our 2 cauls together. Now I have only 1 clamp that's large enough to get into that space. And this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and a great gift from my buddy James King is a handmade C-clamp, the big old wooden screw, but it's got so much reach. I usually just keep it on the walls like an awesome decoration, but my gosh, does this thing solve problems sometimes that I can't solve any other way. Check this out. Isn't that great? Thank you, James King. Thankfully, I do have a second one. Now we'll just let that dry, see how it goes. All right, it's a little bit early to take these out of the clamps, but I think we'll be okay. It's Friday, late afternoon, and I would like to just set the other side up for the weekend. So hopefully we don't see any movement. Yeah, it's still tacky, but it's pressed. So that is looking pretty darn good. I got a little bit of a bubble here. I think that's basically from the epoxy that had nowhere else to go. But considering what this thing looked like before and where we're at now, I can live with this. I think that's gonna be really good. So I'm gonna flip this over and just do the other side. Let's make some epoxy, let's make some epoxy. All right, not perfect, but pretty darn good. I think that's gonna hold fairly well. Now this is a big, giant drawer. Got a lot of rattle and acoustics and things moving around here, so I'm gonna use that hot glue trick all around the perimeter here, and hopefully that will calm down some of that sound. All right, so now we just gotta clean up on the inside, but definitely a little bit more deadened acoustically, so I like it. All right, so it's time to apply the finish. Now we have to be real careful here. Number one, when you refinish furniture, a lot of times you just have deep embedded finish or stain that's just way down in the grain, makes it super difficult to get out. So you could think that you've sanded it all away, but there may still be some embedded there. So a lot of times a refinished project will almost always have a bit of a rustic look to it. If you stain it, it's gonna be a little bit blotchy with light spots and dark spots. Gotta be real careful about that. In addition, on this project, most of this thing, from what I can see, is birch. Birch is notoriously terrible when it comes to staining because of that blotch impact that you get. It just doesn't look very good. The other thing is I did notice, at least to my eye, a lot of this material also looks like maple. Some of the B areas, like the back or the sides, seem to be maple. But again, I'm not always great at identifying the differences between those two. Maple is the same thing. Maple also tends to blotch, so we've got to be real careful about that. Let me show you the finish strategy I'm going to employ here, and it should work like a charm, even on a refinished piece like this. So the stain I'm going to use is a Sherwood product from Sherwin-Williams. This is their chestnut base, no other colors added to it. This seems to be a really good stain. This is actually recommended by someone on Instagram, Isaac, thank you very much. Oddly enough, he refinished the same exact desk, and he showed me the results that he got. My brother looked at it, loved it, so I said, hey man, what'd you use? And I'm just gonna copy what you used. So this stuff in my tests so far has shown to work really well, but thank you again, Isaac. Now, to help prevent the blotching, that's my real problem here. I have a homemade mixture of Marc juice. Yep, terrible name, that's what I called it, but this is a glue, size, and water-based finish mixture that's diluted with water. I have a whole video on that if you want to go see the results you can get with something like this, but this is going to kind of pre-seal the fibers and help prevent some of that blotching, and hopefully will give us a nice even stain. As far as the mixture, I really don't have exact ratios. If I had to ballpark it, I'd say maybe 25% glue, 25% water-based finish, and then 50% water. The actual glue you use, I have Type-On Speed Set, but I usually use Type-On Original. I just happen to have more of this. And the water-based finish can be just about anything. Once again, I happen to have a couple cans of this stuff, and that's what I used. But I don't think it really matters on the specifics there. And you can see the, it's very watery. We're not looking for something super thick here. So it's very easy to apply. Just use a little sponge brush, spread it around on a nice even coat like this. Normally I would work flat, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. If you work flat, then you don't have to worry as much about drips. It's a light area here, not worried about that. That's where the handle's gonna go. So even if it's unevenly stained, that's not a problem. Especially on the areas where the wood takes a turn and becomes end grain, that's very, very critical that we get some of this stuff soaked in there, because that's where you're gonna have the most uneven stain absorption. End grain tends to accept more stain than the face grain. Now I am only gonna be staining the visible outside portions of the drawers and the cabinets. I'm not doing anything on the interior other than maybe a little bit of my clear coat, but that's not for a few steps. Okay, we definitely don't want any drips, so just go over it evenly. All right, so we're gonna set this aside at least for a few hours. We wanna make sure that it is completely dry, and when you put your hand on it, you shouldn't feel any kind of coldness or clamminess to the surface. And while I'm here, I'm gonna get my cleats back in place. This actually will help us, because when we flip this thing over, it'll keep it up off of the surface, make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. And this is where our marks come in handy. Now remember, we don't want to restrict the movement of the top. This cleat, this is one we can set in with glue. These two are just going to be screws, or maybe just a little bit of glue on one side, having all the movement be pushed toward the front. But there's no reason this rear cleat can't be fully glued down. And this is where that epoxy comes in handy. Remember, we put some of the epoxy in the screw holes. That's really nice because it gives these screws something to bite into. Whereas if we didn't do that, chances are we'd just be plowing into some really chewed up holes. All right, let's do a little bit of glue. And ultimately, with something like this, campground rules apply. We want to leave this better than we found it. Of course, the top being the most critical, I'm going to make sure we get good coverage here. So one problem I'm going to have by pre-finishing this piece is that I really want an opportunity to sand everything after assembly. The top and sides kind of blend into each other, and now that we've monkeyed with some of the panels, the joints might not meet up perfectly. So while I'd love to completely pre-finish all of these parts, I think I'm going to have to do an assembly first and then do some final sanding afterwards. I'll be using the original screws, but I'll also use some epoxy where I can to help keep everything together in the long run. It's a glue up time, which means it's time for Oreo. Now the upper strip at the back tells us a lot about the assembly. Once it's in place, we can see that the pedestals are angled inward slightly, so I'll use some clamps to bring them flush with the back strip. And now I can drive the screws through the cleat to lock it all down. And now it's time for the top. Looks like the cleats aren't really dropping in, so I'll use a block plane to take some material away and make room. Come on, you turd burger. Okay, very glad I did this. I have some corrections to make here. Nothing that a little bit of sanding won't take care of, but now that we know it's not going to move or come apart any further, we could flush this stuff up. Now this is also one of the things that makes the fact that this is pretty much all solid wood really advantageous. If it's not solid wood, we would easily burn through our veneer. You can't pull stuff like that off if it's plywood with thin veneer. In this case, all solid wood, no problem reshaping some of this to get it kind of looking uniform. So quite a bit of sanding now. Thank you.
Oh, my finger, my finger, my finger, my finger, my finger.
Sorry. All right, so we may as well attach the base while we're doing all this. And in fact, attaching the base might be a real good way for us to easily get finish and everything down on the bottom of the sides and the back and all that good stuff, so. All right, and now we'll just do the blotch control formula everywhere we plan to put some stain. Just gonna hit what I can while it's on its back and then tilt it back. So now I can wait for all of these to dry, and with that material on the surface, that sealing that it's going to do to the grain, partially sealing, it's still absorbent, it's just not as absorbent. It should give us a much better result with our stain product. Now, the surface here is going to be rough. This stuff here contains a whole lot of water, and when water touches freshly sanded wood, the grain raises. It makes it very rough to the touch. So what we're going to do now is hit it with a little bit of 320, just by hand. You don't want to get too nuts, because if you use a power sander on this, you may actually sand too much and kind of defeat the purpose of what we're doing here. So just a light touch, just so that it's smooth to your hands. There's really nothing visual happening right now. Once the surface feels consistent and smooth. You could stop sanding. And now I'm just going to take a very lightly dampened paper towel. We do not want to wet the surface at this point. We're just using the dampened paper towel to kind of pull the dust off the surface. Okay, and we are ready to stain. Now there are a couple different ways we could apply the stain, but the bottom line is you need to get the material on, let it absorb, and then wipe off the excess. We're not really leaving it on the surface. So you could do as simple as a paper towel application, wipe it on, wipe it off. You could do a stain pad. These terry cloth stain pads are good. I'm actually going to try this Maker's brand pad here. They sent me some of these to try out. I don't stain very often, so this was a good opportunity to try it, but it's super soft and lint-free, which is kind of nice. The other thing you could do, especially if you have the facility and the equipment to do this, you certainly could spray this stuff. Now the key is you want to spray it and then wipe it back. And sometimes when I've done this in the past with a stain, it's great to have two people because you have one person doing all the spraying, the other person comes behind with a couple of rags, and you can get a project stained really, really fast. But I think for this one, I don't really have the kind of place where I can easily spray something like that without making a huge mess with this stain. I'm just going to go with a hand application. Oh, I'm holding this as well. You could use a brush too to apply it to the surface. So as you can see, this stuff is very thin, would be very easy to spray. And now we just apply it evenly to the surface. By the way, this is a product I will be wearing a respirator for, but I wanted to talk to you just on this first round because this stuff does stink. Look at that color. That's nice. The nice thing about an applicator pad is it holds a lot, especially this one. It seems to be holding a lot of stain, and that allows me to move very quickly and also not waste a lot of the stain because we are going to wipe this away. So the more we put on the surface, the more we have to wipe away. Oh man, that thing works great. It's just going to come back with a clean paper towel. I have to get the excess off first, not worrying about the grain direction. And then for the final pass, the clean part of your paper towel. Now you go with the grain. You see how nice and even that is? I believe I still have a picture where I show two of these drawers. I did a little test just to see, and you could see the difference between the blotch control and no blotch control. All right, time to stain the big boy. Wish me luck. I'm going to start on the sides, the bottoms, and make the top the last thing I hit. I am going to get this front edge here, but I'm going to be careful because I don't want to get too much all over the place. I want this to look intentional. Maybe I should have put a drop cloth down. That would have been too smart. All right, let's do the top. I'll get these insides afterwards. Man, these pads are great. Look how much ground you can cover. Okay, nice. Nice, nice, nice. All right, that's looking pretty good. One thing I wanted to point out, I don't know about you, but I was a little bit concerned about my little patches that I made, considering it was maple and this is birch, not exactly a perfect match. And it's, it's not an ideal thing to do. If we could find a way to fix this top without doing something like this, we would. But ultimately, I think to the layman looking at this surface, you're not really gonna be able to pick those out. So you know it, I know it, but I don't think anyone else will. And I think it'll probably kind of blend in even more once we get a top coat on there. All right, so I've got at least one coat of stain on everything here. Don't think I need to do more than that. We're just gonna let this dry for 24 hours and work on a top coat. All right, so I finally got the finish that I was looking for. So this is the Sherwood High Build Pre-Cat Lacquer. This stuff is pretty intense. You wanna protect yourself. I will absolutely be using a respirator with organic vapor cartridges. And I've got my Fuji spray system here ready to go. I don't have a spray booth. In fact, I don't really apply spray finishes very much anymore these days. Thankfully, even though it's in the middle of winter, we have a pretty nice day out. It's about 50 degrees and sunny. So this will afford me the opportunity to spray outside, and then as soon as is feasible to touch the piece, bring it back inside as quickly as possible. And this way we'll ventilate once it's inside, but at least we don't have it sitting outside where there's potential for bugs and dust and all that fun stuff. The one good thing is that lacquer dries really quickly. It sets up fast. So it's not like a oil-based poly or something where you have hours and hours of sticky time. It doesn't work like that with this stuff. So let's get the protective gear on, head to the parking lot and start spraying. All right, so it's been a few hours and I'm gonna give the surface a light sanding if it needs it and then hit it with another coat. This stuff does dry so fast. I've got it on this side of the shop, it's a separate bay, and I'm able to crank the heat up over here. So with that increased heat, I'm isolating it from the rest of the shop, which is nice. This stuff just is ready to go pretty quickly. Now, if it sands cleanly, that's usually the way that I judge this. If I hit it with a little bit of sandpaper and I wind up getting nice dust, then I'm good to go. If I wind up getting that, you know, where it kind of pills up on the sandpaper in little balls, that means it's just not ready. You don't want to keep sanding it in that situation. And you certainly don't want to recoat it with more finish. But this is a finish that builds very quickly. So I'm thinking 2, maybe 3 coats at the most. Maybe the top will get the 3 coats, the rest we could probably get away with 2. You just think in terms of the wear surfaces, the things that are going to get the most wear, maybe you give that one the extra coat. But there really isn't a lot of grit in the surface, hardly any at all. So I don't think I'm gonna have to do a whole lot in terms of sanding, but I will just go by touch, 320 grit paper, and anything that feels just a little rough, we can knock that down.
How you like my booty?
Oreo! What's up? That was a refinishing project. I think it looks pretty darn good. It's definitely got a bit of an updated look to it now, and ultimately for the price that my brother paid, I think this is going to serve him well for a long time. Now, things aren't perfect. There are definitely some issues with the way some of these drawers align. I'm sure it looked better when it came out of the factory a very long time ago, 1949. But ultimately, I still think this is going to work out just fine. There's only so much you can do on projects like this before you're really just completely gutting it. And then you have to ask yourself, why am I not just building a new one? So we'll live with some of the imperfections, but ultimately, I like to think that we're actually honoring a piece that's been around for a long time, that has its own sort of legacy. We gave it a facelift, but we're not completely changing everything about it. Pretty happy with the way everything came out. You know, interestingly enough, talked to my brother and showed him some updated photos of this piece, and he was like, what are you doing? Like, he actually only expected me to just kind of sand it down and put a new finish on it. But obviously we did a little more surgery than that. Well, I am not going to be sad to have this piece out of the shop. It's been in the way for a while, but hopefully we'll be able to deliver it. My brother will get some real good use out of it. So thanks for watching. Hope if you embark on a refinishing journey like this, you'll have as much luck as I did with it. It's definitely worth doing and keeping these things out of landfills just by cleaning them up, straightening them up, and getting them back in service. All right, thanks for watching. Say bye, Oreo. Shoot, boy, big boy.